think the region is indeed looking at a new golden age that we're heading towards. I think there are great opportunities and great challenges. In fact, the number of $500 million in public relations spend growing to $1 billion is one that, rightly or wrongly, one that I researched and published a few years ago. And I'm currently at the point where I'm looking at revising those numbers and looking at a much greater volume. I think the region is in fact entering a golden age because we are at a state where more than 15 or more than 1,000 years of national malaise, where the Arab spirit was suppressed, are in fact coming to an end. It might sound like a bold or ambitious statement, but the reality is that is the truth. The Arab spirit is being liberated, and the consequences for everything in our region, including public relations, are monumental. I think it would not be out of the question to see public relations hitting $2 billion very, very quickly. And I think many of the challenges that we faced in the past, such as lack of appreciation for public relations, inability to measure and value public relations, lack of access to talent, and so on, are all going to be addressed through two things. Number one, a free-minded, free-willed Arab public, and through the continued professionalization of our industry, the results of which we see growing very quickly every year.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that. Eileen Wallace, a particularly unusual standpoint from your point of view. Surely you've been here 10, 12 years or so. You must have seen phenomenal changes in that time within the PR sector.
I absolutely have, and I really hope that Mazen is correct. I would love it if it were a $2 billion industry sooner rather than later. There have been tremendous changes in the PR sector in the Middle East in the time that I've been here since the late 1990s. I'm happy to say that there is a significantly greater level of attention, level of budget, level of credibility paid to PR these days. And the fundamental reason for that is companies in the Middle East, whether those are multinationals or UAE or regional brands, have seen the benefits that PR has delivered to their bottom lines. It's helped grow their business. It's helped grow tourism and awareness of the benefits of living and working and doing business in this region. And because of PR, I think largely in the PR sector, we've seen a tremendous amount of investment from multinational companies who want to come here as they see declining fortunes in the United States or traditional markets such as Asia. They're coming to the Middle East, they're doing business here, and they're recognizing that they need PR and they need expertise, communications expertise on the ground here to help them navigate the complex way of doing business in this part of the world. And they need to be able to tell their story in a very authentic and locally relevant way to lots of different audiences using lots of different media. So I am in the same boat as Mazen. I feel very strongly, and also as Harold Burson yesterday, very bullish about the Middle East PR sector and agree that the best is yet to come.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, third up, Tariq Al-Gandhi. Your view, briefly, on this outlook, if you like, for the Gulf region, but also the PR industry within it.
I think there is always opportunities. However, there is a need to transform the way we do business. As a client here, I would like to see changes on the client perspective, from the client side. There is a huge tendency at the corporate side from the client to really play down the PR. There is a major, I would say, a poor corporate understanding and appreciation for PR role and values on the corporate in general. If you look around, you will hardly find an executives, PR executive among the corporate suites, and basically, aside from the consumer good companies, corporate communication is usually after the fact and not core to the strategic process. Also, from the client side, you find that the lack of focus, strategic focus, the concept in many of the GCC client, the concept of reputation management is dealt with too generically. And for many companies, it comes down to no bad press, or basically everybody have to love us. Thirdly, and equally important, that a lot of the corporates truly looks at the BR from a project management perspective. So you would find clients hire multiple BR partners and stop and restart relationships based on an individual campaigns. Definitely the result in this area would be overly tactical result with poor integration across the spectrum of PR disciplines, including CSR and so on. I personally think there is opportunities for the agencies on the region. However, there is a number of issues have to be addressed. From a client perspective, I believe that many of the companies or the local agencies act solely on their niche, failing to leverage the international network, providing an integrated solutions to us, the client. And I think the clients are demanding a transparent, represent all the capabilities and services that the international global network on a seamless and an integrated solutions. And the second, I would like to highlight that the clients also expect the local agencies to provide a much more complete solutions. The line between BR strategy, media research, and the marketing executions are truly eroding as we are expected to deliver a very complex solutions directly to our client. And what I see that the agencies are basically expected to, provide an integrated service with the core strategy throughout the materials and into the end users' perspective. So I think there is weaknesses from the side from the BR, from the client side, and there is opportunity have to be realized from the local agencies that could really help on taking this industry further.
Okay. Mr. Abdullah, also a client, I guess, and a very large client like your colleague on the right of you. What's your perspective, having indeed come from a completely different kind of work? I mean, you were from the engineering side and ended up in PR. I mean, what's your verdict so far on the industry in this part of the world?
First of all, I'd like to thank all the organizers for holding this excellent conference. A special thank to Mr. Faisal Al-Zahrani. Without him, really, we won't be here on the stage. Thank you very much. As we are at the last session of today, actually, I agree with my colleague, Mr. Al-Ghamdi, and as I mentioned to you, my background, I've been doing engineering for the past 18 years, and then it was the decision from the CEO, who was the Deputy Prime Minister of the State of Qatar, and I've been interviewed, and he said, I found things in you that you can be the right PR for the organization, which is Qatar Petroleum is the national company for Qatar. Besides, we have more than 77 subsidiaries and joint venture under the umbrella of Qatar Petroleum. I thought it was a big challenge, really. We are talking about challenge, opportunity, and all those things. It was a big challenge for me to go inside a new field, different career. I will share with you, my father, he was very upset. He said, you've been studying engineering and all those things, why did you give up your engineering? I said, this is the decision from my big boss, the minister. I can't say no and all those things. And I think I've been doing indirectly PR job when I was doing my engineering. Beside my job as an engineering, I was responsible after working hours for the social activities, sports activities for the past 5 years. So a lot of PR job and all those things. I just want to mention...
Your father thinks it's not a real job.
No, he said you studied really hard to become an engineer. How come you give up your certification and all those things and you work as PR right now? But I just want to highlight, I mean, we've been listening from yesterday and today for so many interesting topics and all those things. And I believe everyone looking at our region, it is true. If you see from the late 1990, most of the conference event organizers, they try their best to hold the biggest conferences and event in this region. I'll just share with you a few examples. One of them is the 20th PR World Conference. That's a good example. This year, for example, the state of Qatar will hold COP18, which is the conference of parties. That's for the United Nations frame of climate change, which is, we never believe those type of conferences will come to our region. Last year, we had the opportunity instead of Qatar to hold as well the World Petroleum Congress, which is, we are the region for the oil and gas. We never had the chance for the past 75 years to hold this type of conferences and all those things. Right now, they come to us, they beg us. We need to have those conferences and those events. This is the largest and biggest challenges on us as PR. We have to work really very hard. We have to have the proper resources. We have to train our PRs very well and all those things. We have to learn from our colleagues, from the specialists. We don't mind to work with expertise from all over, but it's very important to have a local PR. They know better about their nation. They know better about their country. But you must know everything about the globe. As we mentioned today, very important to know about the whole globe. This is my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Open it up. Anyone from the floor, please, want to put a question or a viewpoint? We'll get a microphone. First down here, and then we'll take the young guy next. Sorry, you come second. We've got the microphone to the other guy more quickly, I'm afraid. So we'll come to you in a second. Yeah, good afternoon.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ahmed Mushrif. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I'm a business development director in the company. Its name is Ibyan. Kindly allow me to introduce myself in a different way. I would like to ask my question in Arabic language. سؤالي موجه للسادة الكرام الأستاذ سلطان والأستاذ طارق. السؤال ينقسم إلى شقين. الشق الأول عندنا إن كيف ممكن نعطي الثقة للشركات الصغيرة في مجال البي آر، لأنه عادة لما أجي أتعامل مع شركة راقية زي أرامكو ولا قطر للبترول، هل إيمانهم حيكون بشكل كافي أو بطريقة ممكن تدعم فيها الشركات الصغيرة زي الشركة اللي مثلا أنا شغال فيها بصفتي واحد من دول مجلس التعاون؟ هذا الشق الأول من السؤال. الشق الثاني من السؤال هو يختص فيما يتعلق بتعليم السبلاير حقك وتعليم الشركة اللي أنت بتتعامل معها. أنا أذكر قبل سنتين كنا ماسكين واحد من مشاريع يونيليفر، تفاجأنا في يوم من الأيام إنه جانا إيميل دعوة لحضور كورس مع الماركتينج ديبارتمنت اللي موجود في الشركة، وكان هذا الكورس بهدف إنه إحنا نفهم أكثر البراندز اللي إحنا لازم اللي شغالين عليها ونستوعب أكثر الأشياء اللي ممكن ما تمر علينا.
Fine, absolutely. I think there's an absolutely very important point here. Thanks for the questions. And the two oil representatives here, I guess it's targeting you really. How can small players, new companies, the future companies, if you like, how can they get involved with very large companies like Qatar Petroleum or yourself?
I'd love to answer that.
Huh? You have a go as well. Yeah.
I represent a smaller company. أنا مثل شركة صغيرة مثلك يا أحمد، فالدخول مع جماعة زي أرامكو صعب بصراحة. متطلباتهم عالية، لكنهم أيضا لا يدركون، أعتقد يعني بقناعة أنهم يجب أنهم يعطون فرصة لمثلك ومثلي أنهم أيضا يتطورون في إمكانياتهم. أنا متأكد طارق عنده إجابة على الموضوع هذا أكثر مني، لكن أنا أتفق معك تماما.
Sultan, that wasn't an answer. It was a trap more than an answer. جاوبك بالعربي والإنجليزي؟ طيب, let me answer to everyone. I prefer to answer in English, if you don't mind. I think large companies or clients prefer to have a complete solutions where the line between setting the strategies and executing is going away, and companies are very interested on true partnership, a long-term true partnership where regardless of the size of the corporation, if you're able to work with your client from setting the strategy, defining the objective, doing the audience segmentation, doing the research, coming up with the strategy, and deciding the execution strategy, work with them through all the process, that would be preferred. Small companies sometimes are excluded basically because they cannot provide that wide spectrum of or through the line service. But doesn't mean there is no project for small companies. There's always, they're better on certain project. We find smaller companies are better onto CSR campaigns. They're much better and much more, responsive on. But what I'm trying to say here, there is niche for small companies and there is a niche for a larger one, with the tendency right now going for a longer term partnership that would require companies with a large set of skill covering all the spectrum of the process for PR.
Sure. Do you want to add anything to this from the standpoint of another very large client?
Well, just frankly, it's not different than Sultan and Mr. Al-Ghamdi. The system that's been in place in our company, it's an open for any company, regardless of the size and all those things. And I'm sure it is in Aramco. Once, if you are registered and all those things, if you meet the requirement, however, as Mr. Al-Ghamdi, he mentioned, you can start small with Qatar Petroleum, with Aramco and all those things. We have so many projects, some of them are huge that some of the companies, they cannot meet it. So if you meet technically, you are approved and all those things, I cannot say you're a small company and all those things. You must be registered and you can just buy the bids. Technically, if you are approved, I don't care if you're small or large. You might be much better in a specific small project and that you can meet our requirement.
Thanks very much for that. We have a question from here, and I notice you're there, sir, madam, so you will definitely next.
محمد فهد الحارثي, editor-in-chief of Sayyidati magazine. Thanks, Sultan, for the presentation. Before I go to the question, I'd like to agree with my colleague who asked the question, because the big agencies sometimes they are hesitant to give for small institution. We were in Links conference last week, and we were having exceptional case that Emirates Airlines picked a company called Strawberry Frog, and Strawberry Frog, I think. And this is a small company. They are the media house for the Emirates Airlines, and it was a case study that a small company managing Emirates Airlines for advertising and PR, and that's the way they look at it. They look at the specification and the quality, not the brand and the name. Back to the point that mentioned by Sultan about the relation between media. I came from a print background. I'm editor of a magazine, weekly magazine, and we have this kind of suspicious or skeptical relationship between media and PR agencies that we always think that they abuse or they kind of using the media in turn to achieve their target, and we are a bit hesitant even to open for the PR agencies. Mr. Charles Linton, he talks about the changing of the relation and changing of the role of the PR agency. haven't heard anything regarding the relation between the PR agency and the media. Still, is there any new prospect, new line, new ideas? How can we define the relationship between the media as magazine and print and the PR agencies? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm sure our panel will comment on in a moment or two. We can take a question or comment from over there, please. Thank you.
السلام عليكم. هيفا خالد من أرامكو السعودية. طبعا شركات العلاقات العامة في المملكة تعاني من قصور الدعم من الجانب الحكومي فيما يتعلق بالتراخيص، استخراج التراخيص اللازمة. لذلك نجد أغلب الشركات العلاقات العامة الصغيرة تعمل بمسميات مؤسسات خدمات تجارية أو دعاية وإعلان أو نحوه. ونجد أنه في شركات كبيرة لازالت تعتمد على الجهود الفردية للخبراء العلاقات العامة، يعني بالتعاون. لازالت في شركات هناك تتعامل بالتعاون. فالسؤال موجه للأستاذ سلطان البازعي عن دور الحكومي أو دور الجانب الحكومي في دعم هذه المسألة. ما المشكلة وما الحل من وجهة نظرك؟
سلطان سألك.
Maybe I should answer for both questions, right? Thank you very much. الإجابة على سؤال الأخت هيفا أيضا، طبعا سؤال موجه للحكومة، أنا ما أمثل الحكومة للأسف، لكن التراخيص، قضية التراخيص أنا أعتقد أنها قضية مهمة، وخصوصا معرفة الفرق بين المهن. يعني في الغرفة التجارية أنا رأس لجنة وكالات العلاقات العامة والإعلان في الغرفة التجارية بالرياض. كل التراخيص اللي موجودة في الغرفة كلها وكالات دعاية وإعلان. ما في شيء اسمه وكالة علاقات عامة أو وكالة استشارات إعلامية، مو موجود المفهوم هذا، مو موجود حتى عند الجهات الرسمية، وهذه مشكلة كبيرة. أنا أعتقد أيضا نفس المشكلة ترجع لسؤال الأستاذ محمد أيضا الحارثي في موضوع الثقة بين وسائل الإعلام وشركات العلاقات العامة. صحيح، متى ما تصرفت شركة العلاقات العامة كأنها وكالة إعلان هنا تفشل، لأنها قاعدة تسوق السلعة، بينما رجل العلاقات العامة ومختص العلاقات العامة الحقيقي هو عون للإعلامي، عون للصحفي، يقدم له معلومة حقيقية ولا يقدم له معلومة خادعة، رسالة إعلانية. مو صحيح هذا. لذلك أنا أعتقد أن هذه المسألة يجب أن تبدأ من هنا، من الثقة بين الجهتين. الثقة أن أعرف أنا اللي أتعامل معه رجل علاقات عامة أو رجل إعلان. رجل الإعلان عفوا يعني مو خادع، لكن رجل الإعلان واضح لأنه يقدم رسالة إعلانية، ترويج لسلعة. ليس رجل العلاقات العامة يوصل معلومة. Thank you.
Thank you for the translation on that as well. Eileen Wallace, do you recognise this issue? I mean, you've been here a dozen or so years. You've had to found and run a public relations consultancy. Do you recognise this problem?
I recognize a number of these problems. First of all, the Portsmouth Group started out as a small-ish agency, so the first gentleman who had a question, if you are a gifted person in communications and in media relations and you can understand the business challenges that your potential clients will face and articulate to them how to solve and address those problems through public relations, your company absolutely will grow. And I'm happy to tell you I'm sitting on the stage as living proof of that, because the Middle East is a relatively intimate community, even across countries' borders, where everyone knows everyone else. And my understanding or my experience in this part of the world has been that companies, whether it's multinational companies or locally based companies, are run by people. People feel most comfortable working with other people who they trust and who deliver for them. So if you are that person and you can demonstrate that your company delivers that service, your company absolutely will grow and succeed. And whether that is with a Saudi Aramco or a Qatar Petroleum, that will absolutely be the case, and you will be playing in that field at some point, if you demonstrate that you can follow through. In terms of the relationship between media and agencies, I completely agree with Sultan. I think the agencies that are most successful are the ones that recognize media as another form of client. There is not, and there should not ever be any exchange of money or inappropriate boundaries of the relationship. But the currency or some of the foundation of that relationship is trust, and it's information, and it's openness and transparency. So I agree with you that the agencies that do most well in terms of their media relations and in terms of storytelling on behalf of their clients are the ones that are not selling, that believe in the message that they're putting across and the opportunity that they're creating for reporters. For the media that are here, who are the PR practitioners they like to speak to? The ones that are going to give them a new and interesting and regionally relevant message or story that's going to resonate with their different audiences. So as long as that's the foundation of the relationship, it should be a very positive and mutually beneficial relationship.
Okay, Annie, thanks for that. I know the time is moving on. We'll come to you, sir, in a moment. Just put, Bolat, if you can put up, we're just going to have a quick vote. We haven't got time to go through all of them, but one I think is very relevant at this point in the conversation. If you can put up slide number 3, if you could, what is the greatest challenge facing the PR industry? I want to get a sense, in the Middle East, I want to get a sense of how delegates feel about the sort of things that may be holding it back as we look ahead. You've got obviously your keypad here. So if you could perhaps press the right number there, and we'll see what you all think. So please vote now. Is it running, Bolat?
It's very difficult, sir.
Technology. We're just going to get that technology problem worked out, I think. I'll come back to you then, Mazen Nahawi, because you mentioned something which, to me, I think is, we'll do it in a second. It was very, very important. You mentioned the whole idea of talent and the availability of talent. And in my world, the futurist world, the futurology world, we talk about the next world war of talent because we're wondering where it's all going to come from. Because the Gulf, as we heard in that amazing book by Sullivan, this is going to be a major economic unit in the world. But then you've got Asia, you've got China, India, you've got South America coming through, other countries in the world. They'll all need talent. Where are we going to get it from?
Well, for our part of the world, we have nearly 60 million unemployed young people, who are definitely people who can be trained, and they're born like any other human being. They have their dreams and hopes and aspirations. And I would submit to everyone in the room that there's an enormous amount of talent out there. I don't think that there's a talent problem per se, as much as there's a problem of two things. Number one, it's a smaller problem, a problem of training. And that can be addressed by putting together very good training programs. The bigger problem, the problem we've had for a very long time, is a problem of creativity. Without creativity, it doesn't matter how talented you are. And the creativity that we have been lacking is one that is a consequence of a national malaise, where a whole region could not express its hopes and dreams for the future, where people could not be who they wanted to be, build the company that they wanted to build, or pursue the kind of business that they wanted to pursue. The great accomplishment of the Arab Spring isn't that it changed the people in power. The great accomplishment of the Arab Spring is that it allowed the young generation of Arab people to believe in themselves. And when a young generation believes in what it can do, you're going to find a flood of talent coming through. I'm not actually worried about unemployment and underemployment as much as I am the diversity of opinion on how we get things done clashing going down the line. But do we have a population problem? No. Do we have a talent problem? No. We have a training problem, and going further down the line, we have a problem of highly competitive views which have not yet reconciled themselves within the national discourse, reaching peace with each other.
Okay, thanks for that. We might have the technology going again, so we'll just give it one more try, just see how you feel about these issues. What is the greatest challenge facing the public relations industry in the Middle East? If you can vote now, please press that number on the pad. We don't have any question there about government regulations and so on, which we've just covered off, but nevertheless we'll see what people think about the state of the industry. Yep. Well, talent still does come up there quite high. It's the co-equal first pie, is it not? And the other one is lack of press freedom. Thanks for that. At least that's getting the mood of the room. Does anyone want to come in on that? Yes, sir. We can get hang on, we'll get a microphone to you in a second or two. Excuse me.
It's a race.
Thank you, and thank you all for your input. I think what we heard today is so much of information, of issues, opens a lot of debates, from transparency to talent, to freedom, issues to giving local organizations the opportunity, overseas companies coming to the region, working in the region, not knowing the culture of the region, therefore they're making a lot of mistakes when they are talking about regions that they're just making business in. Okay? But I want to go back to Mr. Nahawi. Okay, yes, Nahawi. يعني لغة عربية
أيوة بالضبط.
مضبوطة.
تفضل.
What he said about in response to your question regarding the talent, the Gulf has a lot of capital. We should invest in the Arab countries. We are bringing companies from overseas to invest in the Gulf, while what we should do as well is to invest in the Arab countries, giving opportunity for the overpopulated countries such as Egypt, the opportunity, okay, to develop economically, socially, and politically. And therefore, we also could have the talent of this country to come and work in the Gulf. So that would bring that balance, the shortage of people within the Gulf, with people who understand the culture and understand the people, the Gulf people. In the same time, as in Arab United countries, if I may, we could then develop the other countries, therefore making that balance, okay, that provides stability, equality, and hopefully freedom within the whole Arab country.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir. In effect, we're seeing GCC almost as a model. If we can get a microphone down here to the front, thank you. As a model, really, for the rest, possibly, of the Arab world, you know, that unity can be achieved. We did it in Europe. Sir.
أنا عندي سؤالين، سؤال عام للجميع وسؤال خاص للأستاذ مازن نحوي. أبتدي بالسؤال العام. يمكن كان في بعض الأسئلة تتكلم عن اهتمام الشركات العلاقات العامة في العملاء الكبار مثل أرامكو وقطر بتروليوم وغيرهم. خلينا ناخذ الموضوع من زاوية مختلفة. ليش ما في شركات علاقات عامة تقدم خدماتها لقطاع المشروعات الصغيرة والمتوسطة؟ احنا نتكلم في منطقة تشجع على ريادة الأعمال وتشجع المشروعات الصغيرة، وعندنا في مدينة مثل دبي أكثر من 90% من المشاريع مسجلة في غرفة دبي إنها مشاريع صغيرة ومتوسطة. في ثغرة في الموضوع هذا من الشركات الاستشارية في العلاقات العامة لها إحجام بالتعاون مع هذا النوع أو هذا القطاع من الشركات لأسباب عدة أبي أسمعها منكم. سؤالي الثاني للأستاذ مازن نحوي، في نظرتك قطاع الأبحاث وقطاع خلينا نقول الرصد الإعلامي في المنطقة كيف راح يكون شكله مع التغيرات الاقتصادية والسياسية القادمة؟ رؤيتك لها بشكل عام كيف تراها؟ شكرا.
Okay, thanks very much for that. In fact, there are two questions there, just to basically shorthand them. The first hand is this whole issue of big companies giving public relations work to big companies. We've got to get a much more mixed sort of approach to this. And the second one is the whole development profile of the region and the issues and challenges that you have to face to get that going into the kind of scenario we've seen in the book by Evan O'Sullivan. So, since I'm under strict orders to have a fairly prompt end this afternoon, I'm going to make this the last part of our panel. I'm going to ask each of you in turn, if I may, starting with you, sir, and move down the panel, just to ask you to address very briefly, you know, those 2 points. By what system can the PR industry produce an atmosphere, a landscape in which the smaller players can get an equal share of the cake, if you like, because they are the big players of tomorrow. If you're going to build the PR industry, you'll have to start with a lot of the smaller ones. Did you want to add a point to that? And I think maybe restate the second question, because I'm not sure I quite got it, although it's about the development challenge in the region.
أنا عفوا بس حبيت أوضح السؤال الأول. أنا كنت أتكلم عن تقديم شركات العلاقات العامة. PR agencies لازم تكون تقدم خدماتها لسمول and medium businesses. إحنا في المجتمع هذا في عندنا تشجيع ريادة الأعمال والانتربرنورشيب، لكن القطاع هذا الكبير اللي هو يمثل أكثر من 90% في مدينة مثل دبي ما في شركات علاقات عامة واستشارية محترفة تقدم. So the second question is clear?
I'm sorry?
The second question is clear.
The second one was about the development profile for the region. Did you want to
No, it's actually about the trends and the media monitoring and PR research in the region.
I see, okay. But I think the valid point there, and we'll, as I say, make this the last part of this session, is that as in Europe, as in my own country, a very, very important part of the economy looking forward is actually in smaller companies, what we call SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. But I get the impression that the PR industry here is geared only to helping and working with, you know, the very large firms, like your good self. So perhaps we can close on this note, if you want to start off with a comment.
Well, we answered, I think, the question to the gentleman there. But I think PR agencies and all those things, they have to serve different sizes of companies, and then they can grow up. But this is my answer, really.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
I think there is opportunity for everyone on the market, and depending on what you can provide, finding your niche as a small company, capitalize on this, and continue to grow, build your capabilities. The trend on the business, as a client, I understand it as a client here, trend this business is to consolidation, where the industry is moving to much more to holding companies. So you see a lot of businesses are lining self with a larger, PR firms. But I assure you there is opportunity for everyone on the region. Depends on what they can provide.
Thank you. Sultan Al-Bazi, sir.
Yes, I was approached once by a very big international PR company from Washington, D.C. for a consultation on a contract in Saudi Arabia. And they wanted to hire my company, my small company, as a subcontractor. And their question was, how come you are not the main contractor and you subcontracted us as an international company, as an international consultant? So this is actually the question should be asked this way. Local companies should be giving the chance to gain experience from the international companies and have this opportunity, and given this opportunity by contractors who actually having the contracts in private or public sectors in the GCC countries.
Eileen Wallace, your comment there. Thank you.
Probably about 10 years ago, it was difficult for smaller mid-sized PR agencies to pitch for big contracts. Because it was sort of like buying IBM. If you were the person making that decision, you weren't going to get fired for making a decision like that if you went for sort of an international networked agency. I think that has I know for a fact that's fundamentally changed in the last 5 or 6 years. So the Portsmouth Group, which is my company, so I can speak from experience, pitches for multinational and regionally based clients against the largest PR agencies doing business in the Middle East, and we win on a regular basis, I'm happy to tell you. And on the flip side of that, at the same time, we make it a part of our mission as a company because we have been a startup and we recognize that the backbone of the economy right across the Middle East is those small and medium enterprises, to go out and talk to talented people, designers, people who are starting falafel chains like Just Falafel, people who are doing cultural consultancy, for the hospitality sector, whether they are, Arabs or expats, we sit and talk to these people and either give them, in some cases, free advice on PR or take them on a project basis or a pro bono basis or a prorated basis to see how we can encourage them, because everybody has a story to tell. There's an audience for those brands as well, and they do eventually grow into big brands. And frankly, some of your most startling successes as a PR agency can be with some of those smaller brands, because if you represent Emirates Airline, of course people are going to write about Emirates Airline. But if you can make a falafel chain like Just Falafel into a global phenomenon and put them on the BBC and watch their franchise agreements roll in as a result, that's a very compelling case study for you as a PR agency. So I think the opportunity is definitely there.
Eileen, thank you for that. And finally, Mazen Nahawi.
I think that's a great point. Being small or a medium PR company isn't a bad thing, but because there are great opportunities in the small and medium sector, and you can approach larger companies as well. But I want to kind of define what a big PR company actually means. I mean, how many PR companies in our region have more than 100 employees? Maybe 3. How many have more than 300 employees? Maybe 1, maybe none. So even the biggest PR companies in the region are in fact relatively small or medium organizations. It wouldn't take much to have a good drive of creativity, good planning, and the point that you're raising, Saad, measurement to prove your work, to become a bigger, stronger agency in a relatively short period of time. To the point about public relations research, as you know, I'm a big advocate of that. I believe in it very, very strongly. And I've always said, and I will continue to say in response to your question, what will differentiate the great agencies from the weaker agencies is their ability to use research to plan, to execute, and to deliver, and to show that they have delivered. And that will be a demarcation point, because you could be creative but not plan, not execute, and not deliver. But if you have those 3 components of public relations research, then you will be able to identify an audience effectively, reach it effectively, and win it effectively. And the future for the winners in public relations will hinge on who uses public relations research better than others.